cars and heating our homes with different fuels, right? It would spur development, as Dan and the professor said, with regard to clean energy. All fabulous outcomes of what this would do. And we wanted to, as the professor mentioned, give a lot of this money back. We gave some of it back to, in the bill, gave some of it back to a small amount to businesses, a lot of money back to the poor, earned income tax credit, bigger personal exemptions on anybody who's making money and paying taxes, a reduction in the income tax for people below a certain revenue income level, seniors who are on fixed income. All of these people will get an inordinately large amount of that money back to them, which was a way of trying to say to the public, get on board with this. This can help you. This is something that you should get behind and support. The environmentalists, I was hoping, would get on support too. And the business community, knowing that this could be revenue neutral for them, could get on board as well. And they were the proponents, as Ellen knows, of increasing the gas tax. They understand how important our infrastructure is. And they wanted that gas tax to go up. And this was a creative way of doing it. So that's what this was all about. Unfortunately, when I introduced it, let's just say it is not as well known as a concept as it should be. So my ask of all of you is talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your relatives all throughout Massachusetts. Educate them on the challenge of climate change. Educate them on what a carbon fee and dividend bill could do for this Commonwealth, could do for the rest of the country, could do for this world. Educate them with regard to how this would work. Help them understand that this is not bad policy, but this is something that so many of us could embrace and it could really help out our Commonwealth in a lot of different ways. The bill got sent to study. It did not go very far this session. We had a great hearing. We had about an hour plus worth of testimony. Mike Barrett was there, the senator from Lexington. I was there and gave testimony. We gave written testimony as well. And I think there will be, and is certainly, as I went around the state over the course of the past 2 years and talked to a lot of folks, there is a growing movement around this concept, and with your help, we can just continue to add more people to it and move this bill forward. There's a lot of flexibility about what this bill looks like come January, 2 months from now. If you want input, I would suggest you obviously talk to Dan, talk to Ellen, talk to anybody else that your state senator, let the governor know, and call Senator Barrett's office and weigh in, because they want to hear your ideas and want to get your support for it. So thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it.
This is a good idea. It's an important idea. And my main interest right now is trying to figure out what words we can use to talk about it so that people can understand it. We have not come up with those words yet. And I'm sure that we can, but it's such jargon right now. And when you use these big words that nobody knows what they mean, it makes people feel dumb. And it makes them not like what you're talking about. And probably not like you. The legislature, there are about 6.5 million people in the Commonwealth. There are 200 people in the legislature. And I think the idea of focusing on Massachusetts to do this is an excellent idea. The legislators are a mixture of people. We are a diverse group if you take for granted that we're overwhelmingly white, we're overwhelmingly male, and we're overwhelmingly Roman Catholic. But within those parameters, there's a lot of diversity. Some of us are rich, and some of us are not. Some of us are single mothers who have had to fight for everything they've ever gotten. Some of us are smart.
Stop there.
Some of us have difficulty writing a letter. We are not all college graduates, which is exactly the way it ought to be. We all represent the district that we're from in pretty good ways. But this is a complicated idea, and we have to figure out a way to talk about it so it can be understood. I mean, I've just been making some notes. Make the companies that produce the oil, gas, and coal pay a tax, pay a price, pay money for the amount of carbon dioxide they put into the air. I mean, that's the point of this. We are taxing, there is a tax, but we're taxing people that nobody likes. So that's the kind of tax we can support. We're taxing the coal industry. You know, who doesn't want to do that? And it's a price per ton. I mean, people know what a ton is. But we have to figure out, it has to be on that level, I think. You can't talk about revenue neutral or, tax and rebate and, all this stuff. People, that just is an instant turnoff to many people, including people in the legislature. And that's the audience for the message that we want to disseminate. The audience is the legislature, and we are a very mixed group. Some of us are good readers and some of us are not. We have to figure out how to explain this in a way that people will say, hey, what a good idea. And Massachusetts loves to be the first in doing something. So if we could convince people that this made sense to do, and that nobody that we cared about was going to get hurt by it, then I think we might have a chance.
Well, before I speak, I just would like to take a moment to express my condolences to the community of Amherst College as you mark the death of Rose Olver, and my condolences to John and to their daughter Martha as well. Yes, so I am an Episcopal priest. I am not an economist. I'm not a politician. And I am really glad to be sitting beside these very well-informed and very smart people who are going to answer all your technical, political, economic questions. I'd like to pull back the lens a bit and to speak a little bit about the spiritual and ethical framework in which I approach a carbon fee, a carbon tax, and a rebate. And I'd like to do that by inviting us to begin with our bodies, which is where everything begins. So I invite us to take a moment simply to bring awareness to our feet on the ground. Knowing that beneath the floorboards there is the good earth, which is supporting us. So I just invite you to take a moment to let the good earth support your feet, and to feel the weight of your body, like the earth having mass and weight and solidity, body to body. And I invite you to take a moment to take a good breath of air and to let that sweet air move through your lungs, breathing in that gift of life with every inhalation. Noticing that we can't own our breath. We can't hold on to it, we can't make it happen, we can't save it for future use. We can simply receive each breath as a gift. Because actually the whole thing is a gift. All of life is a gift. Looking at all of you is a gift. We find ourselves in the midst of this sacred mystery in which everything we experience, everything we touch and smell and see and sense is a gift. It doesn't belong to us. We simply participate in it. And when we touch into that awareness as we keep our feet on the ground and as we breathe, an enormous gratitude can spring up. A sense of amazement and awe. That here we are tonight, we're alive, we're together, we have the gift of life tonight. And gratitude is the wellspring of all religions. So I begin with that spiritual awareness, of a spiritual awakeness, of knowing that we are kin with everything, with all human beings, with all living beings. We are part of one intricate whole, one web of life. So that's the spiritual wisdom that we learn as we place our feet on the ground and as we breathe good air. But you know, our bodies also teach us about the ethical dimension of life, what I think of as the justice dimension of the world, because the good earth beneath our feet is the same earth that fossil fuel companies are blowing up as they carry out mountaintop removal to extract coal. And the same earth beneath our feet is being violently injected with all kinds of chemicals that crack apart shale and release natural gas and poison rivers and streams. It's the same earth that's flooding in some places and going dry in others because of the abrupt changes caused by global warming. And the life-giving air that fills our lungs is the same air into which fossil fuel companies are pouring greenhouse gases as if the climate were an open sewer. The same air that contains more carbon dioxide than it's held for millions of years, and whose delicate balance is being disrupted and destroyed. So our own bodies connect us to the wounding of the world and to the cries of the poor, who are afflicted first and hardest by climate change, and who are already suffering from its storms and rising seas and food and water shortages. So that's the spiritual and the ethical context in which I welcome a carbon tax and rebate, however you want to name it. Putting a steep price on carbon and distributing the fee in a way that is fair and just is an essential step in moving toward a fossil-free economy and healing the devastation of climate change. We need to protect the web of life, which is unraveling before our eyes. We need to move quickly to build a just and sustainable future, and I will include the future for our children and for our children's children. So, I hope we will plant our feet firmly on the earth and take a good deep breath of air, and then do everything in our power to press for a strong and fair and just carbon fee and rebate plan. And I hope that Massachusetts will lead the way. Thanks.
Thank you. thank you all. This is very, very illuminating and elevating and inspiring. But there are questions that I think we need to explore. And one of them is, can this be pulled off state by state? Does a carbon tax or fee and rebate system in the Commonwealth have anything to do with the policies of ExxonMobil or the coal companies that are back in the industry? How does this reverberate to the real bad guys here, the people that are, you know, they're making money off of this and making lots of money off of it? How do we get them to put at least some of that money into alternative energy and research and development and so on? So my question is as good as this could be for the Commonwealth, is it generalizable? Is the message spreadable? And does it either directly or indirectly affect the ExxonMobils and the coke industries of the world?
If I took the first shot at that. Thanks, it's a great question. And I think it's a really important question because I think one thing that people don't necessarily understand about the history of the environmental movement is that state leadership has been absolutely critical every step of the way. When it comes to the Clean Air Act, when it comes to the Clean Water Act, all of the core environmental statutes that we have that are the basic protections for our environment in this country, all of them start with a story of state leadership, whether it's Massachusetts or California, the Northeast states. It's when we are bold and we push ahead and we prove that something can work. That's when you start to see industry start to say things like, when it comes to, for example, the Clean Air Act, industry starts to say things like, well, we don't want California to have one regulatory policy and New Jersey to have another and Massachusetts to have another. And that's when they go to the federal government and start saying, we need a federal solution. So, in fact, not only is it an opportunity, and I think in some ways the fact that there's so little potential for progress at the federal level, that the upside about that is it really does force this question of, leading edge states being the laboratories of democracy and serving that function of, coming up with the new big bold ideas. Because that's not only is that a way that is possible for us to make national progress, it's actually the only way that the environmental movement has really made significant progress.
Yeah, I think everything Dan said, I certainly agree with the need for the states to take a leading role. I'd also add one thing, that I think there can be a demonstration effect from this, that if other states were to see Massachusetts do this, it would encourage them to do the same, particularly if I'm right that the health benefits, the job creation benefits, and the pocketbook benefits, importantly, of recycling the money back to the public, all mean that Massachusetts residents today are better off than they would have been without the policy. And I think when other states see that, I don't think it takes that long for them to figure out that maybe this works for them as well. In terms of impacting ExxonMobil, I mean, as I suspect you know, Jan, and others may know as well, this has even been in the press lately, ExxonMobil already has a price on carbon. They use it as a shadow price in their planning about future oil development plans. They assume there's going to be a price, right? They know this is coming eventually, right? They're already planning for it. What this will do is start to make that a reality. And it's already starting to be reality. It's happening in California already, too. And so I think this just pushes their shadow price out of the shadows and into reality, which is where it needs to be if it's going to actually affect what happens.
A question for our legislators. Does the Republican government figure this at all? Is there any signal?
Speak into the mic.
Yes, I'm sorry. The question is, given the the election of a Republican governor. Not an unusual event, unfortunately, in Massachusetts. And he is declared a fiscal conservative and doesn't like the word tax, and I suspect he won't be fooled by the word fee. What's the likelihood? Is this?
I'll start on this. I think Charlie Baker wants to be a two-term governor. He knows very well that he did not win by a landslide, and that he will have to work with the legislature in order to get any accomplishments done that he can brag about when he runs for re-election in 4 years. So I think he may turn out to be quite pragmatic, and he's not really dogmatic. He would like the idea of something splashy like this. If we could figure out how to explain it so people can understand it. I think, he's going to be looking for something new, and I don't know if he has national aspirations, but he certainly might. And he wants something that will make him look good as governor of Massachusetts. And why shouldn't it be this?
Well, it should be. I mean, after all, Romney was, yeah, right, healthcare.
I agree with everything Ellen just mentioned. I would, quite frankly, just simply add that he is not known for being a big environmentalist. It's not an issue that he's really focused on, but I will say that once he really starts to get his handle on the budget, and he looks at the fact of our needs and the 400 plus structurally deficient bridges that we have, and the fact that 33% of the operating expenditures coming out of the MBTA, our public transportation system, are going to pay interest on the debt that they have, and that the situation of our broken infrastructure is only going to get worse. He's gonna need some ways to tackle this issue. And I remain hopeful that this may be one small piece of that puzzle. With all the other win-win-win. I think Tom Friedman had in his article a couple years ago, you should look it up in the Times, I think he called it a win-win-win-win-win, the carbon tax. So there's a lot of potential benefits to this if we can put it in place.
Yeah, it's funny actually. I've noticed with Friedman that he almost never writes a column these days without finding some way to throw the revenue neutral carbon tax. What's happening in Russia right now, that's why we should put it in the patent revenue neutral carbon tax. Whatever it is, that's why. Yeah.
It's an idea whose time is coming. No doubt. Speaking of time, you've been very patient and attentive, and we do have now some time, approximately 25 minutes or so, for questions from the audience. And make questions, which usually start with why or how.
Understanding something quite similar to what you're proposing. What can we learn from them, and how did they get it?
Great question. British Columbia put a carbon tax in 2008, 2009. We modeled our bill very much along the lines of what BC put into place. They take great pride in that province of monitoring their economic growth since they put it in. They remain to this day the fastest growing Canadian province over the course of the past 6 years. So all those fears that people have about this destroying the economy, just look at BC.
65% support right now in British Columbia.
How did they pass it?
Would you identify yourself when you ask a question?
Alan Eccleston.
That was Alan Eccleston. I'm Alice Swift, and in terms of, I'll try to make this a question, but in terms I think if you say you're taxing these companies that we don't like, and I really think the easiest way to describe what you do with the money is to say that you give it back to the people. Not to say, oh, you're doing this and you're doing that and you're doing this, but if you just say it's all going back to the people on a per capita basis. So I guess the question is how you feel about that.
I think that sounds good.
It's certainly popular. I remain a stickler with regard, if we can raise revenue somehow, some other way to pay for this transportation challenge that we face, that'd be great.
Just to add one thing, if the money does go back to the people as part of their income, the state recovers part of that as income tax. So that's important.
But you have to remember that if this is what politicians say is going to happen, the money's going to go back to you. People don't believe that.
And actually, let me just say one general point about communications and messaging. It's a huge need that we have right now, but the good news is that we've been able to secure funding for focus groups and for polling, and we're optimistic that we're going to have a centralized kind of communications message soon.
My name is Chris Mason, and with the bill that was working through that was in the last legislative session, what were some of the questions, objectives, objections that came up? The fee itself, how do you divvy up the proceeds? What were the messaging that has to be overcome?
It's a great question, and the sad fact is I wish we got more feedback on what they found objectionable. There was...
Didn't understand it.
Alan's exactly right. They did not understand it. That's why I made my comment earlier about we need to educate people about what this idea is all about. And if we need to put it, as Alan, I think, very smartly suggested, in very simple, clear terms, so that people can grasp it and get a hold of it and wrap their arms around it, great, let's do that. But the education is a very key component of what needs to happen right now. We didn't get a lot of negative feedback. I think all the comments about, what label you put on this, the T word, that's important. I don't know what the answer is on that. An environmental fee and rebate bill, you could come up with a whole bunch of different permutations.
My name is Irvine Sobelin. I have two questions. One is, and these are very much about the bill or bills that may be presented. One is, would methane also be included, or is it only carbon? Are we looking at all the greenhouse gases or just carbon? And my other question is maybe a little discussion about the percentages that you would recommend for the amount that would be earmarked, and I think it has to be really specific, being earmarked for either energy efficiency or transportation or other things versus what's coming back as actual cash to the end users.
So on that second question, what's the actual question on the second part?
I don't know, in the bill that you did or in what you would recommend, what kinds of percentages you would see going to specific state projects, and I understand the need for that.
Right. So on the methane, I'm sure in this 5-college area, there's some genius out there who's going to design something that we can attach to the back of all the cattle here in western Massachusetts that will capture the methane that is a big part of this problem, quite frankly. Technically, yes, this would cover it. It's a fossil fuel and it's an emitter of greenhouse gases, right? So how to do that is a bigger challenge with methane specifically. And we don't specifically address it in the bill, but that's a TBD. And it's one of the reasons why we very much approach this as a starter bill, and we wanted to get, to your point, more feedback from it so that we could revise it and amend it, etc., and maybe that will happen this session.